West Coast Sales Manager. Also, this is a perfect segue because today's coffee chat is about education. And some of you may or may not know, I actually do have a background in coffee education. I built the training program for a roaster I used to work for. And then I was the trainer and consultant at a coffee school here in Portland for a few years. And the focus there was to help teach people how to open a coffee business. So everything from the hands-on coffee prep side to leasing and handbooks and cost of goods. Spreadsheets are my favorite. So I'm really excited about this, and I've been pushing for it for a while because we work with a lot of roasters who are totally new to coffee and don't really know where to start for education. So let's go around the room. Marcus Young, would you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi everybody. As Jen said, I'm Marcus Young. It's nice to see, as I'm looking at the attendees, some familiar names here, so that's always fun. I work for Cropster. And my role is education, events, content, basically that whole bucket of things. I'm also kind of in the interim, this is a new role for me. I'm also really doing some of the lifting to launch the e-commerce platform, which links like a web shop to all the Cropster roast to order. So that's a little bit out of the education wheelhouse, but I'm excited to be there. Prior to this role, which is only about a month old, I ran Boot Coffee Campus in the Bay Area. So SCA training facility that works a lot with roasters, with producers, and also occasionally with cafe owners and a lot of entrepreneurs though, on quality improvements, efficiency improvements, that sort of thing. So I really get excited about kind of the minutia of like coffee operations, which I think there's so much opportunity for improved quality, improved efficiency, improved consistency by being attentive to those details. That it's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be part of Cropster also, because it keys up all those things. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. I am so with you on operations. Also, Mike and Marcus, thank you for taking the time today. Appreciate it a lot. Mike Ebert, who are you? Why are you here?
Good, because you asked me. You know, I can't revert. You know,
that's
no.
True. I did invite you, but tell us about your business.
So my name is Mike Ebert. I am the founder and partner in Firedancer Coffee Consultants, which was founded 7 years ago because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I figured, people will listen to me. So, but long story short, I've been running roasting plants for the better part of since 1985. Started with a little company called Gloria Jeans when they had 2 stores. And next thing we were doing, 4 million pounds a year and 50 employees and making every mistake under the book. But what better way to learn? And that proves useful now because when I teach and educate, I give lots of personal stories, and usually they're me who made a mistake. And this is the real life example of why or why not something's important. And then but during that time, where education came from is I was the founding chair of the Roasters Guild, and our dream back then was to create not only a community of roasters. There's this huge organization and, we felt lost in it. So we wanted our own little tent, we wanted to go out into the woods and roast coffee and drink a lot of beer. We nailed that. I don't say we always remembered things, but our goal was to create an education system and write a roasting handbook, which we didn't accomplish, which I'll talk about maybe a little later. It took us like 10 years, 15 years really, until the first version of the current coffee skills program, when we were just the SCAA, started in like 2015. We had little classes here and there that we taught, so I'd been assisting and volunteering and teaching in courses. Gold Cup certification was my first one, like in the early 90s, so, and then Intro to Coffee, which was taught at Expo, was still my favorite class to teach. A bunch of newbies learning how to slurp and spit. It was awesome. What the future holds for that post-COVID, we'll just see. But and then it was actually my wife, who's now partner in the business. She was working for the Coffee Association, and I had started doing this consulting thing. Couple clients, it was really just figured until my next job. And there was an instructor who was supposed to teach in China and canceled at the last minute. And so my wife came home and told me, "You're going to China." with like 3 weeks notice. Didn't really give me, chance to say no. But it was interesting because at the time, most of the SEA curriculum was not taught in one bundles like we teach now. It was, you took a course at Retreat, you took a course at Expo, and sometimes you never weren't offered, you couldn't get all the courses. So I taught them there for the first time and was given permission to kind of reimagine them. Instead of doing them in these segments when I first taught roasting intermediate, it was, oh, let's explore the green. And then I got to pick up the phone and call somebody like Jen. What does that conversation sound like? Oh, now I get samples. What the hell do I do with them? And kind of, oh, now I got to do a profile, so I was the kind of first one to kind of put those together and teach it. But I also was like, I love this. People love my crazy stories about screwing up. I can actually maybe keep them from doing it. And that's kind of what brought me here. So Firedancer is half education and then half consulting in the complete supply chain. That's a little bit of everything that I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Yeah. So I one last piece of business before I forget, because I always forget something. If y'all have any questions as we go through, there is a Q&A function at the bottom. Feel free to submit a question there. I might type an answer. We might answer it live, work it into the conversation, or I might say, email me, jen@genuineorigin.com, and I will put you in touch with the resources. If you've attended these before, they're really just meant to be a conversation. We avoid PowerPoints if at all possible, but Mike, I love that. I think the fact that you're so willing to talk about how you've screwed things up, like that shows such a level of humility. And I think sometimes with some of our like rock star coffee people, that's missing. And it's like, it's always the best. It's always perfect. It's always competition level. It's a 94. And it's just like, dude, I screw up every single day. And let me tell you about the time I spit on a cupping table at a public cupping. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the importance in education to like have a trainer that's actually been there and done it.
Yeah.
And maybe benefited from a mentor themselves. I started 2 coffee companies knowing just enough to be dangerous. Spent a ton of time spinning my wheels. I think at one point, Jen, I even tried to convince you to come and take over one of the companies I started when I moved on from it.
I said, thank you very much, but no.
But yeah, those stories and being able to personalize and say, yeah, you know what, here's why we do it, because I certainly wasted a lot of coffee, a lot of time, missed opportunities, whatever it is, being able to speak to that from a realistic perspective. And Jen, I think like you say too, it's like, it's not all about the 92-point coffees and the showstoppers, because 95% of the customers want to drink something that's consistent and delicious before something that's like exotic and strange.
Well, and I think it's such a facet of coffee to always be learning. A lot of you have heard me say at some point or another, there's a lot of right answers in coffee. There's a lot of right approaches. There's a lot of right ways to do things. I really think the only wrong way to be doing coffee is to not continually be learning and growing. Like, it's an industry that never stops changing. I remember running into somebody at Coffee Fest once years ago and talking, I don't remember where the show was, but it obviously was a coffee dense area. And I was like, oh, have you gotten to go here? Have you been here? Have you been here? And they said, oh, we only drink our own coffee. And I'm just like, how do you know what? Okay. Anyway, so let's actually get into this discussion. When should a coffee professional start thinking about investing in education? There's so many options out there. Where can somebody start?
Colin,
Marcus, or me, of course.
Exactly. No, I mean, but I do think it starts with when.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think Jen, right. It does start with like, when should somebody call on someone for support, and probably that's a little different for everybody.
Yep.
But I know I often seek out education when I start feeling like I'm a little like stale in what I'm doing. Right. When I feel like I'm kind of in a rut, it's great to go and like, so it doesn't really matter if you're brand new at this or if you've been doing it for 20 years. It's just a great opportunity to go rap with somebody and figure out like, hey, is there a different way of doing this? Is there a different approach? Is there some way to kind of re-energize myself with what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I really think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think the answer is right away, all the time. Don't wait. I'm not saying you need to reach out to somebody like Marcus or I, but the resources out there. I mean, how I got to where I'm at there wasn't formal education programs 25, 30 years ago. I mean, Probot had one in Burlingame. That Willem Boot actually was my first instructor in like 87 or something like that. We were both young whippersnappers at that time, and it was good. You know, nothing against it, but it was, you know, to me, the Roasters Guild, just to go to back that story, how that got started. I mean, there's lots of urban legend, not all that, but it was a bunch of people. I can name them: Paul Thornton, Peter Giuliano, Sean Hamilton, Jay Isaiah. There's a bunch of them that we met at shows. We met and we were all like, we got a problem here. I don't understand this. Can you help me? I got an EPA issue. I've got this new coffee. I can't quite profile it. What does this new technology look like? So it was an informal consultative. So that start right away. I mean, develop, you know, relationships at whether it's a coffee fest, wherever, the local cafe. Start having those conversations. Coffee's very unique. I've had people who have joined it from other industries, IT, and they're like, "Oh my God, you guys share? Like, they're your competition? What, really? It's not a secret?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're kind of, you know, we represent, you know, the specialty is what, $50 billion, half the U.S. market, but instead of made it up of 20 companies, we're made up of a couple thousand. We got to stick together, you know." And yeah, it's changed a little bit with success, but the sooner you start that, where I do think, you know, to segue into, you know, kind of the differences, what we try to pry ourselves on in our education and consulting is to start weeding out the dogma. And you were alluding to it earlier. So there's all my mistakes, but there's also the conversations I have in classrooms and even just offline between, you know, pre-blend or post-blend of coffee. Is dark roast evil? No, dark roast is a lost art that few people know how to do well.
Is all decaf
you know, and I like
terrible?
To tell the story,
Yeah.
You know, in the early 90s, I was officially named director of coffee at Gloria Jean's. So I changed all the profiles. We were chasing Starbucks and Pete's. And I'm like, oh, I like dark roast, but I like a more medium roast. So I changed most of my profiles to medium. And I have somebody who does what I do today, call Gloria Jean herself and say, Mike Ebert doesn't know how to roast. He's roasting too light. And I was a little bit, really? But I doubted myself and all that. And so nowadays, even I do think, you know, I you know, to pick on the newer generation, third wave, whatever you want to call them, that, oh, they're roasting sweet sour too light. You know, I bite my tongue because I don't want to be that old guy to the current guy.
Hey,
That's
kids.
my taste and how I kind of grew up. I do think there's some sins with light roast, just like there's some sins with dark roast and some medium roast, but we try very hard, and that's where individual opinion is very helpful. And that's free, you know, but where we kind of come in is we can offer, you know, that little bit more, not getting into the dogma and saying, you know, I'll give people in a class my personal, hey, I like this, I don't like this, but I'm very clear, this is personal.
Yeah.
Or no, this is a defect. Avoid this.
Right.
You know, that is totally objective opinion of that. But it's helping to start realizing that difference, and that you can make a market doing dark roast. You can make a market doing 80 coffees, 85. You can, you know, there, you know, anyway, go ahead, Marcus.
I think that's so true. It's, you know, there are, within the world of coffee, there's a lot of people that will give you advice, and there's a lot of advice that is like, your coffee will only taste good if this happens. And I've always had to spend a lot of time getting beyond that and encouraging people to think kind of outside the box about what that dogma is the perfect word. And I love giving examples of coffee companies that I really admire, even if they roast coffee that I don't, you know, that's not my coffee.
Right.
That's not the coffee for me, or companies that do things out of the box, right? If anybody's ever been into a Phil's coffee and seen what happens behind the counter there, like anything that the SCA teaches, any brewing standards that we talk about, like that's all been thrown out the window. And I don't really care, because if I want something cold and sweet and kind of strange, like that's the place to get it. And also, who am I to judge a company that's like growing like hotcakes?
I will.
Something that resonates.
I will throw in, if what Marcus was just talking about interests you, we did a webinar with Andy Trindle-Mersch of Phil's about sourcing for consistency in blends. That's on our YouTube channel, and I highly recommend it.
And Andy has built one of like the best green coffee teams of any company on the planet. So like, it's, you know, it's a company to be admired for a lot of reasons even. So I think it's so important.
Andy was also one of my most favorite instructors ever I've seen at SCA.
That's awesome.
I wish he was still teaching.
100%. It's yeah, so it's so important because you've got to help people find their own path and to make coffee that they're excited about and that they know that they can find a market for.
That I think is the crux of things, right? So what I think, dear viewers, you could be picking up on right now is education is valid wherever you are in your coffee journey, but these are things you've probably also had a conversation with me about, right? Like, coffee nerd coffees are not where the bulk of the money is, but also who is your market? Coffee's so romantic, people fall in love and they decide to start a business and they have no business plan, no financial plan, no idea who their target market is. They just want to buy the coffees they love and roast them how they like them. And I hate to be that dream crusher, but it doesn't always work that way. So if you when you're hearing Marcus and Mike talk about market, we're all in the same, we're coming from the same place. It's a place of love and we want you to be successful. So sometimes you gotta ask for some help and be a little reflective about it. So we've got Coffee Fest, so I'll give a quick rundown for anybody who's not familiar. Coffee Fest, also I should say, I love trade shows, and I know that makes me a bit of a weirdo, but I absolutely adore trade shows. Coffee Fest, I know, but I do. I enjoy them. I get to see people and like learn a bunch of stuff. Coffee Fest is a show that has multiple sessions throughout the US in different geographic locations. It's very, very affordable to get into. It's usually $40 or less. It's generally going to be more focused on the retailer side. So maybe it's cafes or a roaster who also has a cafe, but it's more focused on that. There's going to be a little bit of packaging, a little bit of importing. You're going to see a lot of syrups, a lot of cups. There's going to be some great free lectures, some paid lectures and hands-on workshops. Like that's what I used to teach, was a full day seminar. And then we have the Specialty Coffee Association, which is our worldwide trade organization. And that has what we call Expo, which is usually the weekend after Easter, but got pushed out because of COVID a couple times. So we're going to have it end of September, beginning of October in New Orleans, and then we're back to April next year in Boston. And that show is more expensive to get into. It's once a year. It's massive. I don't know what this year is going to look like, but usually it's 2 expo halls and you cannot get through it in a day. It can be overwhelming if you've never been to a show before. Is that about, I think, and then there's also, there's free lectures there and paid trainings. There's usually cuppings. But yeah, so that's how that all breaks down. So whenever we say SCA, we're talking about the Specialty Coffee Association, and there are specific courses you can do through them, like Mike's talking about. So then there's all kinds of online stuff. I mean, there's so many different, there's, you know, online subscription trainings, there's all kinds of options. Both of you have a really extensive background in education. Like, do you feel like there are specific courses that work better online or that people should take the time to do in person?
I mean, I think it's partly just people knowing themselves and knowing how they like to learn. You know, there's definitely those learners that just want to be hands-on with the coach, with the mentor the whole time. And there's others that are maybe a little bit more, I want to get this content and kind of try it on my own. So, I mean, I think it's important to be aware of that, but you know, at the end of the day, there's some stuff you just need to be in the room with somebody to do. Like if you're roasting coffee on one machine, I'm roasting coffee on another machine, it's hard for me to teach you how to roast coffee, no matter how many samples we ship each other back and forth by FedEx. You know, barista skills, of course, like you fall into that boat even more because can't tell you how your what I think of your shot of espresso if I'm not there in the room with you.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I do think like cupping classes and like business type operations type classes work really well online. The last year has been great with that. Like we've been able to show that we can calibrate a group of cuppers and kind of do like a pre-queue type of training by sending standardized samples around and helping people understand and learn the protocols and figure out the mechanics of how the cupping form works. It's no substitute for getting the queue, but it certainly is a confidence booster and a great way to get somebody on that path.
So I'm going to interject with a specific question that is not on our list. What's the queue? What's a queue?
Yeah, good question. It's a certification. Originally, it was a way that coffees could be certified, that they had been scored by a trained and impartial cupper. But since then, it's really become a license for cuppers. It's, a lot of times people say it's like coffee's sommelier. I think it's a little bit different than that, but it's basically assuring that that as a cupper, you've been tested and are able to evaluate coffees according to a very specific protocol, and come to a result for those coffees that's within a fairly narrow band of other cuppers that also are Q certified. So it's very useful for evaluating green coffee and talking about coffee from producer to roaster. It has very little relationship to like quality control of a final roasted product or consumer preference for a cup of coffee.
And it's a pretty intense process. And everybody doesn't pass the first time.
It's not designed to pass the first time. I mean, really, it is designed to be a process. You show up for 6 days, 3 days of training, 3 days of testing, some retakes built into those first 3 days. But if, it's like nobody should feel bad if they have to then go and do some retakes. Like that's built into it. You've got 18 months to show up to 2 more classes to do your retakes of things that you don't pass the first go around. Like it's a process, it's like nobody becomes an expert overnight. So it's kind of designed to practice as you go.
Mike, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, first go back to the online and in person, because I have been teaching online for a couple of years, not SCA stuff. Okay. We teach, I'm a food safety certified lead. I teach food safety courses. We did do some intro kind of where you're coming out for a week to learn roasting, and we'd get them all online and kind of, hey, let's get to know one another. Let's go through some basics, more etiquette and what preparation, and that sort of thing. And then we started with roasting foundations online, which may sound counterintuitive because I kind of went, no way, how can I not be in front of a roaster with you, And I think we're going to continue, and that's the only one we've done so far. Now, I've done some special green introduction, more as a case by case, they've requested it, but it's really hard. I got to get in and I got to taste what you're tasting, and most things. But the roasting foundations came about because we had, people may not know this, but both Dietrich and Probot had their best April Mays they've ever had in the history of their companies right in the middle of the pandemic. So I had a bunch of people, hey, I got a roaster showing tomorrow. I know nothing. Can you help? So we started doing that online, and now I'm going to continue it. And so what we've done is we've even reduced pricing a little bit, where we will offer the 3-day roasting intermediate, which is in person, for a price, and then we include the foundations as part of that price. But that foundations happens 2 to 3 weeks before. And I'm going to continue that because what it allows for intermediate, it allows me to put more theoretical content into that foundation. I still send a sample kit, a coffee roasted a couple different ways that we go through. We go through cupping protocols. So literally it takes about a day out of my intermediate 3-day. The benefit is we get more time on roasting.
Yeah.
The bigger benefit is, when I first started teaching roaster intermediate, let's say, and the old version was called roaster level 1. That was a 5-day course. And I had different sections, like even the green to coffee or seed to cup, it was called. I used to do that in about 45 minutes because what I was teaching are people, not necessarily a Marcus or your level, but pretty close. They were just people in the industry want to check off the box. So,
Right.
you know, they got through it. They all understood it. They took the test. They passed. I'm a good instructor. And then this last couple of years, I got people who, yeah, we decided we're going to buy a roaster and get into coffee, but we don't even drink coffee. And I've never run a manufacturing plant.
Yep.
So it's like, really, you're going to put the weight of the world on my shoulders to keep you from failing? So that seed to cup went from 45 minutes to 3 hours, and the questions weren't dumb. They were smart. They wanted to learn. They wanted to, but it was like, wow, I realized that I have 35 years of stuff, half I've observed through osmosis,
Right.
that I'm trying to regurgitate to somebody in a couple hours. So what it does is it allows time to absorb, so they come in, and then I just do a quick review. Remember what we talked, remember Maillard reaction. What is that?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that. And now we can actually focus on what it's actually tasting like in the cup when you manipulate that particular, instead of they're still going, Maillard, what?
Yeah.
You know? So, and then for the pro levels, you know, so for those of you who don't know the SEA system, and that's why I've chosen to focus on that, is because it does allow me to keep my dogma out of it. As an instructor, I've got to maintain my, you know, they're looking at me all the time. I'm part of a creator group that helps update the curriculum. So I'm constantly being challenged. Then Mike, you're a little dogmatic there. You know, here's a new thing, you know. But how it works is there's an introduction to coffee course, which is meant to be a prerequisite for all of them. It's a 1 day. I would say if you're already in coffee, you already bought a roaster, you've already opened a cafe, too late. That's too basic. You're already crazy. And I mean that literally. You've gotten into this coffee thing. So then it goes to 1 day or foundations of either green coffee, sensory, roasting, brewing, and barista. And that's meant to be a welcome, touch. Here's terms, here's some jargon, here's some slang. Let's go roast to roast without burning down the roastery, you know? And then there's the intermediate. Now you're doing this for a living. So you have to, you know, there's tools, protocols, regulatory, you know, quality control, you know, and then the pros, you know, my explanation of, okay, I've taught you the rules. Here's how you break them. Now, not literally, but how do you take all that and apply it to your little market, your philosophy, your town, your equipment, you know, what you believe in, and be successful at it, you know? So the pro levels though are tough. They are like the Q.
Yeah.
You know, foundation, I pretty much have built my foundation how I teach them. If you pay attention and you're half awake, you're going to pass the test, because there is an online written test. Intermediate, a little tougher. You better be taking some notes. You better be, you know, but still, if you're really actively participating, you're probably going to pass. And I don't teach the test. I'm not saying that, but that's what it's meant to be. Pro? No, that's tough. Okay. It's meant to be, and I don't have, you know, pass rate. I don't have exact numbers, but, you know, at least 30, 40% don't pass the first time around. But they're meant to be. So those, how I'm looking to change, and I haven't done this yet, because I'm kind of waiting to see how COVID is unfolded, is those I'm thinking of, there's still going to be 3-4 days on site for a pro, but there's going to be a day or two online content, because some of the, you get into the deep chemistry of coffee. That hurts my brain to teach, let alone absorb. So to give people a chance, these are things that those, you know, we've learned over 35 years or longer, you know. It gives you a chance. In most college level courses, you don't take a 3-day course and come away, ooh, I got my MBA. That's a whole different thing.
Really good analogy.
Combination, and I think COVID has taught us something. I mean, I was just telling this story earlier today, that, you know, this time last year, I would use GoToMeeting for client calls and all that, and very seldom up to COVID did people actually turn on their video. You know, it was more just an easy way to get everybody on a conference call, you know. Now I got to the point where people want video just to say hello.
Yes.
Or I got, you know, I had this part in summer where it's like, okay, I don't need to see your face every single time we talk. By fall, we all got a little sick of it. You know, it's like, oh, really? Another webinar? Jen's offering another, oh, really?
Yep.
I think now I'm starting to get the sense that it's taught us something the hard way, that we can have this healthy combination of, you know, online interactivity, you know, community learning, as well as, but, you know, like you said, the strength of a trade show. And I laughed at you that you love trade shows, but I actually agree. They're not going to go away. You know, that face-to-face is still going to be very important. But I think this is, you know, this sort of thing, now you may feel comfortable enough to walk up to me at a show to say, hey, You know, he's
Totally.
approachable, you know,
Yeah.
or no, no, I don't like him so much. I like Marcus better, which is fine. You know, that's part of the process.
And
There's a fit for everybody. Yeah.
yeah, and
Go ahead,
I
Marcus.
want to say that just to dovetail on what Mike's saying about like online and these kind of hybrid style courses. I mean, I too have been thinking about my future courses, either SCA or not, like kind of just more independent classes, you know, offering this kind of hybrid where there's maybe some pre-recorded video content for people to watch, you know, like the chemistry stuff, right? There's also this more live webinar stuff to cover the theory and to get to know each other. You know, that benefits a lot of different learning styles. You know, it makes the folks that want to sit with the content a little bit more privately, quietly before like jumping into the pool. It gives them the chance to do that. But it also makes it more accessible. I mean, Mike talked about the affordability of it, which is part of it. But, you know, like when students come out here to California for courses, you know, like 30% of my students are coming internationally.
Yeah.
Like, you know, 40% are coming from elsewhere, kind of, let's say North America, which only leaves, you know, a small percentage, you know, that are coming, 30% that are coming from the West Coast. And if I can think of a way to organize, instead of like asking somebody to be out here almost a week, if we can cut that back and have them only come out for a couple of days, it's like really focused, really hands-on, like really in the weeds, like that saves them time away from the office, hotel, rental car, like all of that stuff that is not insignificant when you're budgeting this stuff. So if we can make it more accessible that way, I'm 100% on board. And
That's an excellent point. I like, because I think back, like the classes when I was teaching, it was 5 days or 6 if you stayed for roasting. And the way it was structured was like every day was like a little bit of hands-on, a little bit of lecture, a little bit of so we could keep people engaged. But you're absolutely right. When I had students coming from the Middle East, from Asia, like it would have been, if we could have shaved those couple of days off and had a couple of intense days of online lectures, that would have been so much easier. And I think you're right too. Like I remember doing in teaching in person, it was always like, hey, if you're not comfortable asking a question in the group, come find me during a break. Because there's always going to be those couple of people who need a little more time to process or aren't comfortable speaking in front of a group. So I love those ideas. That makes so much sense. Again, always evolving. So I also think it's worth noting, in my strange love of trade shows, like those lectures can be super valuable and free. And so I think if you're going to take the time to go to Expo or go to Coffee Fest, like check out the schedule ahead of time, like build your schedule by what content you want to go consume. There's like I say, I used to lecture, but I always used to go to lectures when I had time in the morning before the show floor opened and I had to be in a booth. Like it's so easy. And I also can't speak highly enough for that aspect for networking. I've built so much of my coffee network through going to those trade shows, going to those lectures. It's been really helpful for mentorship, but also just making coffee friends. So I think that can be a really low barrier way to get into that. But being that we have some consultants with us, I know consulting is like a sticky area, but let's talk about it a little bit more. Like, when does consulting work? Who should be asking about consulting?
That's
I know.
good question, because if somebody, you know, to say I'm a consultant, still, you know,
it's the longest four-letter word in our language.
I have, you know, I've had consultants that were hired at companies that you know, it just didn't make me feel comfortable, or didn't know our company and gave advice, you know. So I've seen the negatives of
well, that's the Bobs, right?
You know, yeah, and I would, there was somebody, and I'll you know, some of you may know Peter Giuliano, and you know, him and I started the Roasters Guild together, and we've kind of done this our whole career. I respect the hell out of him, but we've been, you know, polar opposites of a lot of things, but that's been healthy. And he actually, it was a Facebook group or something like that, somebody had, like, why are you using a consultant? They're overpaid, and he kind of said, no, wait a minute, you know, hey, consultants have knowledge that's probably specific and something you need help on that you either can't afford somebody full time. In my case, my consultant rates and all that, yeah, that you may look at and go, wow, I wish I was paid that per hour. Well, I've got overhead. I've got, I'm one client away from not having a job next week. And I'm being a little sarcastic. I built it, but it's the nature of the beast, but when to engage, my process and how we work, it doesn't always work this way, but generally I prefer come take a class with me first. Because most people starting who just bought a 12-kilo roaster and they got 1,000 square feet of space, I know their budget. I know there's not a lot of zeros in that budget that they can put my way, okay? Or they're just not going to be successful. I know that. So it's come take a class with me, because that way it's a lot cheaper, okay, for them to come out and I get to know them, okay? I'm usually here before class, during lunch, after class, talking, asking questions, adding specific content the next day that's not part of the curriculum, but it's, flavored coffee. Yeah, you're all going to shoot me for saying flavored coffee, but hey, you could make money. But you can have contamination. There's issues, but if you can do it, hey, I know that very well. So I'll add a little section to that. But generally, and then I say, hey, you still want consulting help? Let's hop on I give free 30-minute consultation to talk through. 90% of the time, well, maybe not that much, 75% of the time, they don't need me. Hey, you don't need me. Here, talk to Jen at Genuine Origin. She'll help you query your first menu. You can trust. You have enough, you have the confidence there. I know you can cup, because, I like to sleep at night. I just don't want to take people's money for the sake of, I want to, if I can move you ahead, make you more money, save you money, yes, I want to be your partner. But oftentimes it's not required. So, and that allows me sometimes to cut out the ones that don't need me and find out after they've hired me. Oh, also that class, just to go back to education, well, that's important. Some of the best stuff I've learned hasn't come from the instructor's mouth. It's come from the person next to me and their insight, looking at it in a way that's not my market. I'm not going to do it, but hey, that's interesting, So anyway, but then, consulting gets into, you're having a particular problem. Most of us have weak areas. So to me, it's if you're going to hire a consultant, I ask for a brain dump before we even have a first conversation. What are you actually looking for me for? What do you feel your strengths and weaknesses are? Because oftentimes I find that's where they need the most. They're just confused on what that is. So instead of a 2-week consultant over the course of a couple of months, it's like, no, come take a cupping class. Here, I'll send you some samples over a period of a couple of weeks, and we can calibrate online and give you that confidence, But in other cases, I've had people that just want to hire me because they've started a small business. They're running another one. Hey, Mike, can you do my coffee buying for me? I trust you. I've got enough other things to do. We work out something that works, and so it fits a purpose for them for their particular business. So it's hard to have a one size fits all kind of, who I work with and how I done. It's everything from, here's a rate where you get me for 8 hours, over a course of a month, and it can be 2 hours here, 1 hour here, no this month, but more, and that's a low rate because it's flexible. Others where it's like, no, I need you on site and you need to train my roasters and you got to write the SOPs, you got to do a food safety plan. Yeah, obviously that's the other end of the spectrum, but for them, it's worked out. What I would advise though is when you're hiring a consultant is really clear, and I try to do this just so I can sleep at night. It's what am I delivering to you, or what are they going to deliver to you? What are those clear deliverables? Sometimes they're not black and white quantifiable, but have something that's very clear for you to look at and go, oh, is that really worth that money? Can I achieve that a different way? Or is that really what I asked for? And then it could be a great relationship and really help you save money and move forward. Short of that, it could be a disaster. So.
Yeah, I think, Mike's absolutely right on the education first, right? It's a great way to get to know the consultant. But I think, it is interviewing the folks that you're talking to and understanding what their expertise are.
Yeah.
Because, I like, in classic consultant fashion, Mike almost mentioned SWOT analysis without using the term SWOT analysis, which can be so off-putting. But I do exactly the same thing, Mike. When I have like a half hour or an hour kind of consultation before we ever get the ball rolling, I really try to get into and identify kind of where their weaknesses or what threats they might be facing, where they need to have an expert to fulfill that. Because you know what, if it's accounting, they don't want me.
No.
But yeah, and I do think it's so important to understand exactly what your role is. And I think it's important with customers. I'm a trainer at heart. I'm not a consultant. So if somebody hires me to consult them, it's going to be to help them solve that problem on their own in the future. I don't want to be the consultant that they have to call back every time they have a problem developing a profile for a new coffee they got in. I want to try
Empower
to
them.
tools to solve those problems in the future. And and what that means is that as a consultant, my agreements often have accountability on both sides.
Mhm.
Like, hey, you know what? This is going to work. I've got these deliverables, maybe gray, maybe black and white. But in order to advance this program to the next step, you're also going to have homework. And you're going to have to do like most of the heavy lifting. If I do a lot of work with coffee producers looking for market access. And the only ones that are successful are the ones that are willing to like do the deep dive into the coffee industry and can sort of think about how they can leverage my expertise and my network to make that happen. If they expect me to do it for them and just to magically launch and have a successful brand, it never works out. So that's, a lot of it's my interviewing customers too, and knowing when it's time just to say, yeah, we're not a good fit, because I don't necessarily see that, my skill set's going to be a good match.
Yep.
I've walked away. And you said something very key that I just want to reiterate is that, like anything in life, you get what you put into it. And consulting, I've worked at, especially, roasting consulting is one thing, and I try to do the same thing, but, I screw you up on a roast. Okay. You get upset. Customers are mad. I do regulatory too. I do food safety, EPA, OSHA. Okay. Something there that's a little different. Okay. So I've been very clear of like, you got to put some skin in the game. There's a, you're going to use a consultant, make sure, we're not going to make all your problems go away. It's got to be a two-way street. And I'm very clear in that, hey, here are the deliverables. Here's what I need back from you. And that's where the classes also come and help, because the other thing I find is, you said SWOT, so now I'm going to steal it. This is on you, Marcus. But, when I do that SWOT analysis for them, oftentimes, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they perceive are based in some kind of dogma. That they think they've got to fit into this certain thing. And it's like, no, you don't. You might consider some different ways, but no, and so they're confused about what they're trying to achieve. So getting them that education sometimes kills the need. Like, no, you're good to go. You don't need to do that, or maybe you need to look at something else. So, but yeah, very good point, Marcus.
At least then
you get what you give. Because it's related to SCA Expos. People ask me, going to Coffee Fest, should I become a member? And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for it. I've given a life of volunteering. I've been a past president. I've been, probably lost a company because I spent too much time at SCA, if I was really honest with myself, because there's a lot of volunteering. But people, is it worth it? And I say, if you're just going to pay the membership and expect all of a sudden you're going to be better, no, you get what you put into it. You show up, you volunteer, you clean cups at a cupping class, you take tickets at an event, you get what you put into it. And I know that from both of you. I mean, I've seen you both do that. Anybody I know successful in coffee, that's where I've seen them in the back, doing the cleaning, doing the volunteering. That's all part of the process.
Yeah. It's and I think to both of your points, like that difference between education first and then consulting, it's like, it's also, I mean, the reality is you're going to spend a couple $1,000s on some really good education compared to, I've written consulting contracts for, 4 months and it's 6 phases and it's 10 grand. And it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. So I think being smart about that and understanding that paying a consultant doesn't always fix every problem. But yes, I agree. Like that also, your point to the SCA and volunteering made me think about finding, if you have a local coffee community as well, like Marcus, I know you're familiar with the Oregon Coffee Board. Like we may not be able to do a whole lot of in-person events right now. But as the president of the Oregon Coffee Board, I'm sure happy to put you in touch with somebody that might be in your community that helps you. You know, the Bay Area has a community, Chicago has a community. Like if there's a local, like almost mini trade organization, make sure you're participating in that too. Whether or not you're paying to do that, but just like building your network, building your skills through that. And just for that, like being able to trade information. So education's expensive. SCA classes are expensive. They're not free. Do you, for people who are maybe new or just don't have the wallet to go do a 5-day class, do y'all have any good starting places you feel like?
Yeah, you know, something especially with new roasters that is always, I mean, this is just a very specific example, but that's always so surprising to me is, you know, they'll spend all this money on a roaster, even if it's a small roaster, what I would consider like inappropriately small, but it's still a big outlay of cash, and they want to learn how to roast. And they're reluctant to spend the money on just buying coffee and just like roasting coffee that may not taste good.
Yes.
You know, and that's one of, I think, one of the best advantages of like going to a campus and like, or going to an expo and taking a class is like, you're just burning through Mike's coffee or my coffee and you don't need to worry about it. But it's like, boy, you know, investing in one bag of one coffee that's good but not great is such a great way to start sort of teaching yourself. I mean, it's very much the way that I had to learn how to roast. You know, this was back long before there were classes to take, and I had to like beg forgiveness, not ask permission to use my company's roasting machine. And I just contracted a couple of bags of coffee and spent, you know, a couple of $100 to have coffee just to roast. But having the same coffee to roast and roast again and roast again and roast long and roast fast and roast dark and roast light and follow the rules that people had told me to follow and break the rules that people told me to break was probably the single most important thing that I've ever done, kind of for my own professional skill. And I think people get intimidated. It's like, okay, yeah, I can learn how to be a barista if I have access to a machine. I can spend $50 on a 5-pound bag of coffee. It's a little bit different to step up and, you know, buy the 170 pounds of coffee.
Yeah.
But do it. I mean, it's like being able to do that. And if you have a network, you know, like Jen mentioned, the Oregon Coffee Board or Bay Area Coffee Community, or even if it's just kind of an ad hoc network of the roasters.
Yeah, or one of the Facebook groups.
Like, you know, just share some coffees with them. Just get their feedback. Like just start roasting a coffee and seeing what works and pay attention to that. I mean, it takes some record keeping and some rigor and knowing this is the roast and this is what I'm tasting, and over time you start matching some expectations up. I think that's really important, and it's something that I see people hesitate to do. They'll quickly go and they'll spend $500 on a bunch of different coffees at Sweet Maria's, and they'll learn how to roast, how a bunch of different coffees respond in the roaster, which is valuable too. But learning how one coffee and your impact on that as a roaster is just huge.
You don't even have to buy 170 pounds. I know where you can buy 65 pounds.
I know, right? A 35 kilo bag that just comes with UPS. It's like the most beautiful thing. But having enough where you can do 30 roasts, 40 roasts of the same coffee.
I love that idea. Mike, what do you think?
I agree completely. I mean, it's I think one, you know, you got to think about your journey and your path. You know, I've had people who have bought roasters because they've got a couple cafes, very successful. They all think, oh, we're going to save a ton of money, and then, you know, usually it's like, well, maybe you're doing it right. But what we're bringing up that is generally those people, if they've run a successful cafe, they've tasted good coffee. They you know, typically now there may be multi-roaster shops, so they kind of got an idea. And because my caution, even though I agree with, in fact, I say that all the time, usually after you've left at least a one-day course, is buy a coffee, burn through it. Don't buy a cheap coffee. Don't buy a, you know, Panama Esmeralda, you know, buy something that, you know, has a little flexibility and burn through it. Because there's one, when roasting alone, there's, you know, there's what do you like? You know, what does this do? My intermediate class is basically designed, we roast a coffee 20 different ways.
Yep.
And taste it. I never say this is the sweet spot. I may say, okay, we probably don't like that, but generally it's more, can they get the piece of equipment to do what I'm telling? And then we go taste it. What did that do? And then when they come back, that's where the craftsman, that's where the artisan, you've got to put that puzzle together into, oh, how do I want this coffee to articulate? But thinking about your journey, it's like if you have absolutely no experience at roasting, you just bought a 12 kilo and it's being delivered in 2 months, that self-learning, and you want to be making money and producing coffee a week after you get that roaster, take some courses.
Yeah.
I think it's the only way to get, or you might find a local roaster that's open, will let you come in and do it. But it's getting that, keeping you from falling dogma. I've had people who just love their profiles that they've done on their own and they come take a course. I had one just last month. For the record, we are open. We clean, we full open spot. I've got HEPA filters. Anyway, so we are open, come, but
I'll give a prop to my previous employer, Boot Coffee, and say they've got courses scheduled on the calendar this month too. So thanks for the segue for that.
Yeah, no problem. But I just had somebody who was convinced he hated dark roast, like dark roast evil. He would speak up in class. I'm like, kind of hold that to yourself, sir. Let me be the teacher here. And so we started exploring, and I did some while they were roasting. I went over to my sample roaster and I did a couple different versions of a coffee. Not well into second crack, but definitely you were tasting dark roast notes. And I put them on the table against some of them because I just got a sense as he was tasting and describing that, hey, no, sir, you don't like light roast or medium. You just have this somewhere you picked up, and he left here with a completely different mind. So that's where that education can help, but there's other ways. There's, the way I learned, like Marcus learned, is it was other people in the industry. It was, in Chicago here, I can name 30 roasters, and I can name half of them would probably allow you to come in and say, hey, I roasted this, let's cup it against yours, talk to me. And they would openly do it. When things were normal, I know Jen Unorgen, I used to open my facility, which, by the way, Jen, you can anytime you want, cupping,
I would love that.
There's a lot of people, how we're going to cup down the road, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I've always felt cupping in groups was kind of disgusting to begin with, but the new method where you're coffee in a cup, and I'm trained the old way. I can't do it. I keep forgetting, but I've also got to we cup with full independent sets of coffee here. So when we're doing cuppings, you've got a table, you're 10 feet away from anyone else. I've got 3,000 square feet, so we're wide open. But there are times, even if I have the same lot of coffee, and you're saying, "Ooh, I taste this in my cup," my only way of really helping you is I got to get my spoon in that cup. Yeah. So we're still struggling with how to, yes, we're using the new, for people who don't know, instead of just slurping with a spoon, you're putting a spoon into another cup and you're just slurping out of that to prevent contamination. And forget COVID, I think it's the right way to go. I think cupping's always been, a little disgusting in large groups, but that is an important part of training to me, is being able to get into the cup you're tasting and either go, yeah, you're right, that's bad, or it's that, or it's this, or no, maybe you think it's that, but it's actually this. That's something we're struggling with, and how to overcome that. And we have our method now, but we'll get better at. So.
And Mike, thanks for mentioning cupping, because I think cupping is another, no matter what you're doing in coffee and where you're trying to learn your skills, you've got to become a cupper.
Yep.
And if that's taking a class, or if it's when I wanted to learn how to cup, I was lucky. There was a coffee importer in my town that I purchased a lot of coffee from, or my company did. So I just knocked on their door and said, hey, do you mind if I join you at your cupping table 1 or 2 days a week and just taste with your team? And you pretty quickly then learn to start sussing out, oh, this is what they mean when they say acidity. This is what, what I was talking about is rubber. Other people are calling hazelnut. Maybe I should adjust my expectation because my palate's weird.
Right.
That's a true example from my young pup days as a cupper.
Yeah. No, and I think you're spot on. And I would say from my teaching background, you just have to keep tasting coffee, and you have to stop and think about it. And it doesn't have to be super expensive to get into. I'm weirdly cheap about buying some coffee equipment. Like I use Libby Rocks glasses for cupping because they're $22 a dozen. And if I break them, it's not the end of the world, as long as you're consistent. And I'm always happy to talk to people about how to set up cuppings at home. I want to keep us on time. Unfortunately, I know the three of us could talk, but I want to keep us on time. So I'm going to start to wrap up. Y'all. Oh, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for having us. I would not recommend these two if, I'm always going to be transparent, and I've taken one of Mike's classes at Roasters Guild. I'm happy to put you in touch with him if you want to talk more, but thank you. And Marcus, Marcus has a great educational background, and I know some of y'all know he's a reference on my resume. That's how far back we go. So thank you so much for taking this time. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to follow up with me. This will go up on our YouTube. And I'm going to put up a poll. Mike, you're welcome to hop off just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to leave this up for a couple of minutes. But education is so important in coffee, and we just want y'all to be successful. If there's anything you're curious about, if there's anything you're looking for, please just ask. Really, no dumb questions. Just get in there and have a conversation. Any last comments?
I got to hop off. I've got
Thank you, Mike.
Course I got to get back on. I'm teaching today. So hope I helped answer some questions. And Marcus, always great to share some time with you, and especially you, Jen. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye. Marcus, any last words to add while I let this poll run for another minute?
No, I think it's great. I just, for attendees, I just put my email in the chat, marcus@cropster.com. We're still just on the cusp of figuring out what education looks like, I think, at Cropster, but I guess keep your eyes open because things will be coming. But if anyone has questions, I'm always happy to be a resource too. Awesome. I really appreciate it. And I can't champion, how important education is in this, wherever you are in your journey. So for sure, that's what we're here for. We want you to be successful and find the right coffees. So on that note, I'm going to end our poll, and I am going to close out this webinar. So again, thanks so much. Y'all have a wonderful time, and we will see you again soon. Bye. Bye. Thank you.